The Balkan Pact was signed in 1934 and it was made up of all the countries that border Bulgaria, with the goal of containing the country and preventing further expansion, as the Bulgarians had irredentist claims in all of their neighboring countries. The danger for the Balkan territorial integrity and stability ended up being not Bulgaria, but rather it was Italy and Germany, which had partitioned Yugoslavia, gave away Romanian lands and fully invaded and conquered Greece. The question in this alternate history is, what if the Balkan Pact was activated when Italy invaded Greece, bringing all of these countries in a state of war against the Axis? How do you think the Second World War will change? I would answer all of these questions you may have in this video. Thanks to the comment section for suggesting this video idea. The reason why the Balkan Pact was never activated is due to the contract itself, as all member countries would only defend each other in case one member is invaded by another Balkan country, which is either Bulgaria or Albania. The thing is that Italy also holds small parts of the Balkans, and later they annexed Albania, so you could argue that this pact should have been valid in case of an invasion by Italy as well. One cool thing is that in the Balkan Pact, all members had abandoned their irredentist claims to one another, as to focus on containing Bulgaria. This meant that Greece and Turkey finally got along after centuries of conflict, mostly because of Bulgaria. In the Balkans, in order to defeat one of your enemies, you must reconcile with an old enemy. Another reason why the pact was never activated once Greece was invaded is similar to the Little Entente with Czechoslovakia ceasing to exist, with Romania and Yugoslavia not backing up their ally. In this alternate history, we can alter the exact document as to also be against Italy, not just Bulgaria and Albania, but also we can have a change of mindset in Romania and Yugoslavia. The thing is that both Romania and Yugoslavia were part of the Little Entente, which ceased to exist after Czechoslovakia was taken over by Germany. The Balkan countries would need to realize that they need to work together and not abandon their allies, or they would be next on the chopping block. Of course, this is not too highly realistic, but I have several ideas on how this could happen. Historically, the Romanians and Germans met in 1938, with the German side demanding more trade concessions from the Romanians. The Austrian painter personally demanded that some ultranationalist leaders are let free from jail and put in charge in Romania. The Romanians responded to this by taking their ultranationalist political prisoners and executing them. The official excuse by the Romanian side is that these prisoners tried to run away and were executed as a result of that, but we can't ever know. What we do know is that Romania was sort of hostile to Germany, but despite the Romanians executing German sympathizers, the two countries still traded as if nothing had happened, as Germany wanted the Romanian oil and was willing to close their eyes for now. Yugoslavia, on the other hand, knew that Italy is allied with Germany, and that the Italians have irredentist claims in their country, as such war was expected. Similar situation could be said for Greece, as they could also fear Italian invasions, but also Turkey, which has claims in the Italian Aegean islands of Rhodes. The Italians were also promised zones of control in Turkey with the fall of the Ottoman Empire, but this was reversed, so Turkey could also potentially fear an Italian invasion. As such, all members of the Balkan Pact had very solid reasons as to stand strong against the Axis, and they all had common enemies, but unfortunately they didn't realize their potential and didn't stand strong, with all member countries except Turkey having something to lose. Had these two together, they could have thrown a wrench in Germany and Italy's plans in the Balkans. So now we know why this pact was historically not activated, but what if it was? The thing is that the Balkan Pact was initially designed against Bulgaria. In 1938, all of this changed in the Salonika Agreement, where Bulgaria was allowed to remilitarize. Bulgaria's army was limited to only 30,000 soldiers by the Treaty of Neuss-sur-Seine, and Bulgaria is reportedly the only former Central Powers member that obeyed by the treaty limiting their army, unlike Austria, Germany and Hungary. As such, with the Salonika Agreement, Bulgaria was not seen as a threat to the Balkan Entente, as the member countries recognized that Bulgaria cannot win a possible Third Balkan War, so they opted to start working with Bulgaria in 1938, rather than to push them away to the Axis. Historically, even France and Britain advised the Balkan Pact to consider working with Bulgaria, rather than casting them away. I mention all of this because I think it's really likely that Bulgaria becomes a member of the Balkan Pact, which would allow for all member countries to focus on the Axis and recognize them as the major threat to the peace and territorial integrity of the Balkans. Bulgaria in the interwar period was truly chaotic, but I want to focus on the 1934 coup d'etat, where a military dictatorship was briefly established that banned all political opposition and introduced heavy fines and prison sentences if anybody were to create a political party that would challenge the dictatorship. Tsar Boris III, with the help of loyal military union officers, managed to dismiss the Bulgarian dictator at the time, Kimon Georgiev. This is important as the Tsar practically restored control over the country. If this were to fail, Bulgaria would have most likely been invaded by the Balkan Pact, which was a real possibility. The fact is that Boris III managed to reform Bulgaria and appointed peaceful-minded ministers, which allowed the Salonika Agreement to even happen. But it could have went one step further, allowing Bulgaria to join the Balkan Pact. Here's how. In the 1934 coup d'etat, the Târnovo constitution was abolished, but Boris III brought it back after Chimon Georgiev was dismissed. The Târnovo constitution was actually written in this building right here, and for its time it's considered as being one of the most advanced liberal constitutions in the world, as it was modeled after the Belgian 1834 constitution. After that, Boris III managed to show to the Balkan Pact that Bulgaria has peaceful intentions, and the main sign was that Bulgaria suppressed the internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, which operated in Greek and Yugoslav Macedonia, causing trouble for both countries. Bulgaria further showed their peaceful intentions by signing the Bulgarian-Yugoslav Treaty of Eternal Friendship on the 24th of January 1937, so this convinced the Balkan Pact to change their stance. Most importantly, allegedly, but not confirmed, in November 1936, the chiefs of staff of the four Balkan powers signed a draft military alliance that would include Bulgaria, seeing them as an integral part of the Balkan Pact. Bulgaria was never admitted due to the Second World War starting, with Greece and Yugoslavia being invaded, while Romania's land was partitioned and they became ultranationalist, allying with the Germans. In this alternate history scenario, I would have Bulgaria to join the Balkan Pact in early 1937, and the Balkan Pact would then focus on the Axis and become paranoid and fear an Axis invasion when Czechoslovakia ceases to exist. All member countries would agree that they must defend each other at all costs, as to not end up like Czechoslovakia, realizing that the West is not in a position to save them. The Balkan Pact's Treaty of Mutual Defense would be adjusted, where it would be triggered in case of any member being invaded by Germany, Italy or Hungary. So the pact is actually going to participate in the Second World War. As Italy would annex Albania on the 7th of April 1939, the Balkan Pact's unity would be at an all-time high, as they would know that war would be inevitable, due to the West allowing Germany and Italy to annex countries for free. I actually have coins from Italy and Italian Albania, both are from 1941 and look very similar, and on the Albanian one you can see Victor Emmanuel III, who actually became the king of the Albanians as well, so it was more so a forced personal union rather than annexation. The Balkan Pact would know that they cannot rely on France and Britain, but Poland didn't get the memo and still believe that the Allies are going to save them. Unfortunately, they would be very wrong, so Poland would be partitioned and cease to exist. The Second World War would start in exactly the same way as in our own history, but Romania wouldn't supply the Germans and the rest of the Axis with oil, leading to more tensions between the two sides. Still, I expect Operation Vesiriubung to have the exactly same conclusion, and I see no reason why the Balkan Pact forming and being more united would prevent the fall of France, but Germany is yet to dominate the continent. It looks like if Germany wants to consolidate the Balkans, they would need to take them by force, which is unlike in our own history. Historically, Romania willingly joined the Axis and their land was given away, while Bulgaria also joined the Axis as to not be invaded, but Bulgaria didn't officially join the war. Yugoslavia was still invaded, but the war was very brief as the country collapsed mostly from within, while Greece only fell after Bulgaria had joined the Axis and Yugoslavia had already fallen. We can expect that the Axis are going to have a really hard time taking out the Balkans, and Italy would prove that on the 28th of October 1940, where they would still invade Greece. And while they would have some initial success, they would lose ground, most notably the port city of Vlor. The Axis cannot really reinforce Albania further, so this is why historically the Axis conquered the rest of the Balkans as to finally capitulate Greece, but this time it's not as easy. Italy would invade Greece via Albania, which would trigger the Balkan Pact into a war against Italy. Most notably, this war is now separate from the Second World War, as the Balkan Pact isn't at war with Germany just yet. Believe it or not, Germany had declared war on Greece almost 6 months after Italy, so, applying this logic, for a brief period of time, the Balkan Pact wouldn't join the Allies and be at war with Germany. Under these conditions, I would say that it's more than guaranteed for Italy to lose Albania, as they would lose parts of it to Greece as they did historically, while now Yugoslavia can also invade from the east and north, overrunning the country. The Italian port of Zadar could also fall rather easily after a quick Yugoslav siege, with Italy starting to lose ground in the Istrian Peninsula and western Slovenia. I expect this to happen in around 1 to 3 months after the war has started, so Germany would need to join this war as to save their ally. I can potentially see Italy to become even more unstable, looking similar to the 1943 Italy we had in our own history. For the sake of this alternate history scenario, as I want to make the video more entertaining, I would have Mussolini to be deposed and the Germans would fear that Italy could leave the war altogether. As such, Germany would coup the Italians and install Mussolini once again, under the Italian Social Republic, which would practically become a German client state and lose some land, exactly what happened to Italy in 1943. But this time it would happen 3 years sooner, due to the Balkans defeating Italy so badly. With Germany taking Italy, this serves as the perfect excuse to merge the two separate conflicts, so the Second World War would expand, with the Balkan Pact joining the Allies, and the Axis declaring war on the Balkan Pact. Hungary would not gain northern Bessarabia and Vojvodina for free. This time they would need to fight for it, which would further strain the Axis resources. I don't think it's too insane to consider that the Balkan Pact would abandon some territory, as to focus mostly on defense, waiting for British reinforcements. I think it's completely reasonable, so Romania and Yugoslavia would retreat to more defensible positions, behind rivers and holding down mountain ranges, so most of Transylvania would be given up, but the rest of Romania would become a fortress, as the German tanks would be less effective in crossing the Carpathian Mountains. The Balkan Pact truly has the potential to hold out the Germans and not fall if it wasn't for the Croatians, which would start a civil war in Yugoslavia. Basically, a large gap would open up in the front lines, making the Balkan Pact rush troops there, and as a result of that, making their defenses on other fronts less strong. The British Navy would be present and aid in some operations, but not too many British soldiers would fight on the side of the Balkans. The reason for that is Italian North Africa. Historically, the Germans sent Erwin Rommel, where he showed his skills and was able to do some gains, but not capture the Suez Canal. This time, Erwin Rommel, I assume, would be sent to the Balkans, with the Axis practically abandoning Africa, as there is no reason for Germany to try to keep Libya. First up, it was Italian, so Germany wouldn't care too much about it. But also, Britain was able to supply the region better, while the Germans and Italians had to cross the Mediterranean Sea, dominated by the Royal Navy. So, I would assume that the German High Command would realize that they cannot win on the African front, so they should abandon it, no matter how painful it is. The British could be transported to the Balkans, but the truth is that the British task force would be somewhat minimal, as they would see the writing on the wall. Remember that Britain had been caught off guard at Dunkirk not even a year prior, so them over-investing in the Balkans while they are losing is unlikely. Basically, Britain would like to prevent a second Dunkirk. I truly believe that the British could hold out the remainder of the Balkans if they were to send their full force, but due to their embarrassment in Dunkirk, they would not risk it. As such, the Balkan countries would be left mostly alone to fight all the foreign invaders. The Balkan Pact has the advantage of terrain, as the Balkans are mostly mountainous, slowing down the German advances, but not preventing them. I assume that Yugoslavia would lose Belgrade, making them surrender quite soon, as to avoid further destruction, leading to their allies to pick up the slack. Romania is also not in a favorable position, as they would have lost Transylvania, and with the collapse of Yugoslavia, it looks like the German tanks are soon going to be in Bucharest. Romania, right before they capitulate, are going to sabotage their own oil fields, preventing Germany from having them. The Romanians are also going to dismantle their military production factories and ship spare equipment to their allies, but the Romanian front would be lost, leading to Bulgaria to put forces on the Danube and hold out the Germans. By that time, the year would be 1941, and Germany has already lost all of Africa, in addition to making slow progress in the Balkans. What I can see happening is for the Spring Offensive to be a huge success, crossing the Danube River, capturing the Bulgarian major cities nearby, which would trigger yet another coup by the Zveno, which was the military dictatorship I mentioned earlier in the 1934 coup d'etat. Remember that while Yugoslavia, Bulgaria and Romania have fallen, their monarchs and loyal supporters would flee and make governments in exile, so the German puppet governments they are likely to establish in the region are going to lack any legitimacy, as the world would recognize the monarchist governments. Germany is likely to push for Thrace and Macedonia next, where the Metaxas line would be defended, so Greece is likely to keep their core territory safe, while occupying at least half of Albania. As for Turkey, they would occupy neighboring Bulgarian lands and use the Stranja mountains as natural defense to the north, and the Maritsa river to the west, with the south and east being oceans so safe from invasions. I can see Britain to deploy a task force, ready to protect Istanbul and prevent it from falling into Axis control. Now the situation looks dire for the Balkans, but I must admit it's not as bad as it may seem. There is a historical anecdote that Germany would have made more gains in Operation Barbarossa if they weren't preoccupied in helping Italy in Greece. No matter if you agree with this theory or not, we can all agree that the Axis is in a far weaker position. And if you believe that the Germans would have performed better in Operation Barbarossa had Italy dealt with Greece on their own, then this Balkan campaign would for sure alter Operation Barbarossa greatly. First up, I think that we can all agree that Germany would invade the Soviet Union a bit later, as they still need to consolidate the Balkans and prop up puppet regimes there. These regimes, as I said, would lack any legitimacy and would be unpopular with their people. I can see Hungary to take even more of Romania and Yugoslavia, practically their pre-World War I borders except the Croatian part. This is because Germany wouldn't want to create a bigger Romanian and Serbian puppet states that could rebel, so Germany would choose the strategy of divide and conquer. For the same reason, Macedonia wouldn't be awarded to the Bulgarian puppet government. Rather, Macedonia would become its own state and occupy the historic region of Macedonia. Greece, I can see, is still losing ground in most of their major cities, concentrating their defenses on Athens, which is their last hope at holding out the Germans. The thing is that Athens is extremely defendable, especially with Britain helping out in the Aegean Sea, so Germany is forced to take the city head-on, crossing the mountains and fortified areas. It would become too costly that the Germans may decide not to fully conquer Greece. After all, if they take Athens, it doesn't guarantee that Greece would still capitulate, as they can retreat to yet another stronghold on the Peloponnese Peninsula. So this is why I can see Germany sparing Greece, as the resources needed to pacify them isn't just worth it. Germany already got most of the Greek population and resources, so they would establish a puppet government and not look at the Balkans ever again, as they would soon initiate Operation Barbarossa, believing that the Soviet Union would be easy to take. Now, in this alternate history, I predict this would happen by early 1942, but not during the winter, so perhaps April or May. If this is the case, then the Balkans simply resisting has almost delayed Operation Barbarossa by an entire year, while giving the Allies more time to conquer all of Italian North Africa, so the Allies are by far in a stronger position. Not only do the Axis invade the Soviet Union considerably later than it was in our own history, but the Axis powers are weaker in general. Historically, Bulgaria didn't join the war against the Soviet Union, likely being the reason why Boris III was killed by the Germans. Hungary and Romania did join the war against the Bolsheviks, where they famously held the flanks near Stalingrad, with the Soviet Union taking advantage of this and encircling the German troops. This time Hungary is more devastated, as they had to fight the Balkan countries, losing tens of thousands of soldiers, but also more are required to occupy and garrison their newly gained Balkan holdings, most of which aren't even majority Hungarian. As such, the Germans would force the loyal but demotivated Hungarians to fight against the Soviet Union, while also forcing the disloyal and devastated Bulgarians, Macedonians and Romanians to take part in Operation Barbarossa. The Battle of Stalingrad is going to be an even bigger German disaster, assuming that the Germans make it this far. Remember that Romania has blown up their oil fields, so the oil situation in the Axis would be dire, creating the need for them to try and capture the Caucasus oil fields. As such, Germany would be in a rush and be guaranteed to make some devastating mistakes. The Allies would have consolidated Africa by 1942, so they can look towards attacking the Italian positions, and with Japan and the United States of America also joining the war, it is not looking too good for the Axis. I wouldn't be surprised if after Operation Barbarossa started, the Allies managed to land in Sicily and Sardinia, potentially even Corsica as well. When the Vichy French regime collapses, the Allies would have all of North Africa and use it to stage landings on the Apennine Peninsula. Historically, some of the technology wasn't even developed in 1942, but it is not out of the question that with a far weaker Axis, that the Allies managed to land in the southern boot of Italy and try to push north, taking Naples, increasing discontent among the Italian population. Remember that there are still strongholds in Turkey, and especially Greece, so the Allies don't need to land in the Balkans, as they already have two openings into the peninsula that they are likely going to use. As such, a bit of Greece would be liberated, but progress would be slow due to the Balkan mountains. Germany would need to divert more forces to protect Italy and the Balkans, further weakening Operation Barbarossa. Still, the ultranationalist Germans would believe that the Soviet Union would collapse any second now, as the Germans saw the Slavs and communists as inferior, so they expected for Operation Barbarossa to be done in a few months or up to a year. As such, they would make the crucial mistake of focusing on the Soviet Union, yet neglecting the Allied landings in Italy and their advances in Greece, which I assume would only worsen the situation, with the Allies nearing Rome and Greece being mostly liberated except Thrace. The Bulgarian Tsar Boris III would lead the army like he did historically. I assume that he would be stationed in Turkey, where the Turks would occupy a bit of Bulgaria for defensive purposes. Boris III is likely to rally supporters to this exact region and keep fighting, boosting his cause. I would have the Allies not even think about D-Day and landing in Normandy, as they would rather easily take out the Balkans. The thing is that the Balkan governments in exile would be extremely popular and legitimate, while the people would despise the German puppet governments, as they would see the Germans as destroying their country and then sending their young men to die in the Soviet Union for the benefit of Germany. When the Allies push more into Bulgaria and Macedonia, I wouldn't be surprised if the puppet governments are dismantled with a coup in both states. The Allies are likely to see a lot of success, so they're likely to double down, with American troops even being present in the Balkans, liberating more and more countries and territories. The Yugoslav government is likely to return, with Albania being occupied for the time being. Unfortunately, the Bulgarian and Romanian soldiers fighting under the Germans would remain under Germany, and they would never hear news of their homeland, as Germany would suppress this information, but the Soviet Union can do a propaganda campaign, giving them the opportunity to surrender, which would be quite effective and taken by many soldiers. The situation for the Axis would be even more bleak, as they would start losing on all fronts, with the Soviet Union finally getting it together. Importantly, the Lend-Lease that was sent to the Soviet Union would also include Turkey and Greece, bolstering the armies of the two countries. As such, even more advances into the Balkans could be made, with the Romanian and Serbian puppet governments collapsing and switching sides, with their respective monarchs coming to power once again. By that time, the year would be 1944, and I think that the Allies would also push for Operation Overlord and Operation Dragoon, as to liberate France and get them on their side. These operations would look similar to our own history, so they would not only succeed but also do better than they did historically, so I'd say that most of France would be quickly liberated, while Italy would become unholdable for the Germans, resulting in them to pull behind the Po River. At that point, Mussolini would be assassinated, so Germany's only allies would be Hungary, which is even more devastated, and Croatia, while Slovakia is too insignificant to make a difference. I can see the Allies to enter core German territory, with the Soviet Union doing the same not too long after that. The post-war borders would be already agreed upon prior to Germany surrendering, so let me tell you how this peace treaty would go. First up, as to not be Eurocentric, I don't think that anything in Asia would drastically change, so the Soviet Union would still gain Manchuria, give it to Communist China, which would eventually win the Civil War, with Korea being partitioned like it was historically. Now the meat of the video, which is the European continent. This is the peace treaty we got, but I would add several changes to the historical peace treaty. First up, I would assume that Greece would take northern Epirus at the expense of Albania, with the rest of the country either becoming independent or joining Yugoslavia via a personal union. For the sake of this video, I would do the second option. Greece would also take the Dodecanese Islands from Italy, while Turkey would be awarded Syria and Lebanon, as France would be forced to decolonize, so they can give these lands to Turkey instead as a token of the Turkish participation in the Second World War. Now I don't know if Turkey would want these lands and how realistic this is, but I would allow it for the sake of this video. Romania, I believe, would want to punish Hungary by taking land east of the Tisa River, including the major city of Debrecen. The Romanians are likely to do this as to prevent further Hungarian expansion, but also because part of their population was Orthodox, so they can claim that they are protecting the Orthodox Hungarians and Romanians living in the area. Notice that Romania also gets to keep Bessarabia. The final Balkan Pact member I want to mention would be Bulgaria, where they cannot directly annex any land, but it's entirely possible that their allies give concessions to the Bulgarians. I can see Yugoslavia to give up small parts of Macedonia to Bulgaria as to prior to the Second Balkan War, and for Romania to give up southern Dobruja. The reason for that would be Bulgaria would gain these lands in exchange for abandoning their claims in the rest of Macedonia and Dobruja. So while they may get land, they are binded by a treaty to not seek the rest of Macedonia and Dobruja. Basically, Bulgaria immediately gets the land in green, but they promise to never pursue getting the land in red. The rest of the peace treaty I assume would go similar, with Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia and East Germany being all in the Soviet sphere. The Balkans are generally leaning towards the Western democracies, but they would prefer to remain neutral, as they wouldn't want to enter another massive war. As to de-escalate the Cold War, both sides would agree to let the Balkan countries be neutral and independent, like Finland and Austria. This I think is entirely possible, as in this alternate history, the Balkans are going to be truly decimated. Historically, the Balkans didn't suffer too much damage, believe it or not. This is due to Yugoslavia capitulating quickly, while Romania and Bulgaria sided with the Axis without a war. The most devastated Balkan country was Greece, which was formally invaded over 6 months, leading to great destruction and occupation. This can be seen after the Second World War, where Greece entered in a civil war, mostly due to Slavic communists to the north wanting to be part of the Soviet sphere. The suffering, destruction and the resulting poverty would only push more Greeks to communism, making the historical Greek civil war more deadly than it should have been. Now Romania, Bulgaria and Yugoslavia are just as destroyed as Greece was historically. I would predict that there would be a lot of civil unrest in these countries for the short term, but I'm optimistic for the future of Bulgaria and Romania. Boris III of Bulgaria would be seen as a hero, not surrendering and not abandoning the Bulgarian people, later returning and liberating them, expanding Bulgaria's borders in the process. Michael I of Romania could still carry out the 1944 Romanian coup d'etat and remove the government of Ion Antonescu, making the Romanian and Bulgarian monarchies really popular among their people. As for Yugoslavia, they mostly liberated themselves with the help of the Chetniks instead of Tito and his supporters, due to the Soviet Union not reaching in the Balkans. As such, this Yugoslavia is drastically different from what we had in our own history. Peter II of Yugoslavia would come of age to rule the country in 1941, so he can do something similar to the Bulgarian and Romanian monarchs, but be less effective. The reason for that is the Croatians, which I would assume that the young and inexperienced Peter II would have trouble reintegrating. After all, the Ostashi of Croatia wanted to assimilate 1/3 of the Serbian population, to deport 1/3 and to kill 1/3, so they were very radical, even Germany condemned their actions. Yugoslavia would become really unstable, and with them being more devastated, there could be more communist sympathizers, so I don't rule out the possibility of Tito starting a civil war in the country. So I'm not really optimistic about Yugoslavia, as they would collapse eventually, even if Tito comes to power. If Yugoslavia takes most of Albania, this would only make the situation more problematic, with the Albanians siding with the Croatian and Slovenian opposition, perhaps achieving a majority. The Yugoslavia of this alternate history ending would look similar to Hungary as to prior the Great War, just barely in majority and prone to collapse due to the powerful opposition. As for the Balkans as a whole, they're going to be even more devastated, but they would receive more funding from the Marshall Plan. I would say that this war would be a net negative for the Balkan countries, as hundreds of thousands would die in the Second World War, so maybe the Balkans are poorer than they are today, unless they side with the Western democracies and join the European Union as soon as possible. The Balkan Pact was originally formed to protect their member countries against Bulgarian aggression, which looks similar to the Second Balkan War. I suggest you check out this video on the screen, where I give you a scenario where Bulgaria would win the Second Balkan War. I hope to see you there. Goodbye.